Your father can't save you today.
Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you changed everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the people we let into our family lives. My name is Robert, and this is my story. A story that nearly destroyed my family, but ultimately taught me the true meaning of protection, perseverance, and unconditional love. I need you to understand something before I begin. This isn't just another story about betrayal or heartbreak. This is about the kind of evil that wears a smile, the kind of darkness that pretends to be light, and the kind of love that refuses to be destroyed no matter what forces try to tear it apart. This is about 3 little girls who saved their family through dreams that nobody believed, and about a father who almost lost everything because he trusted the wrong person. But before I proceed, I want you to do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and drop your country in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening to me from. Thank you. When I think back to the beginning of this nightmare, I realize that all the signs were there. But when you're grieving, when you're overwhelmed, when someone presents themselves as your savior, you don't look for the cracks in their facade. You don't question the motives of someone who seems to love your children as much as you do. That was my first mistake, but it wouldn't be my last. I want you to listen carefully to every detail, because somewhere in your life, there might be a Laura waiting to strike. There might be someone you trust completely who is planning to destroy everything you hold dear. And if my story can save even one family from going through what we endured, then sharing these painful memories will have been worth it. You know, they say that when you love someone deeply, you never really see it coming when tragedy strikes. I was 28 years old when I met Joanne, and from the moment I laid eyes on her at that church barbecue in Atlanta, I knew she was the one. She had this smile that could light up the darkest room and a laugh that made you forget all your troubles. Joanne was everything I had ever dreamed of in a woman. Kind, intelligent, beautiful, inside and out, with a heart so big it seemed impossible that one person could contain so much love. I remember that first day like it was yesterday. It was a humid Sunday afternoon in August, and I had only gone to the barbecue because my mother had been nagging me for weeks about getting out more and meeting a nice girl. I was standing by the food table, trying to decide between potato salad and coleslaw, when I heard this melodic laughter coming from across the churchyard. I looked up and saw Joanne surrounded by a group of children, all of them hanging on her every word as she told them some animated story with grand gestures and funny voices. She was wearing a simple yellow sundress that seemed to glow in the sunlight, and her natural hair was pulled back in a style that showed off her graceful neck and the delicate earrings that caught the light when she moved her head. But it wasn't just her beauty that captivated me. It was the way she interacted with those children. She got down to their level, looked each of them in the eye when they spoke, and treated their questions and comments with the same respect she would show an adult. I could see the genuine love and patience in everything she did, and I knew immediately that this was the kind of woman I wanted to build a life with. I spent the rest of that barbecue finding excuses to be near her, helping her clean up after the children's activities, offering to carry her purse when she needed both hands free. Every conversation we had revealed new depths to her character. She was a second-grade teacher who talked about her students like they were her own children. She volunteered at a local homeless shelter every weekend. She sent money to her aging grandmother in Alabama and called her every single night without fail. Joanne had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the world when she was talking to you. She would ask thoughtful questions and really listen to your answers. She remembered details from previous conversations and would follow up on things you had mentioned weeks earlier. She had an incredible memory for people's birthdays, their children's names, their struggles and triumphs. Laura was there that day too, though I barely noticed her at first. She was Joanne's best friend from nursing school, someone who had stuck around even after they chose different career paths. While Joanne worked with children, Laura had gone into hospital nursing, working long shifts in the cardiac unit. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to the way Laura watched Joanne and me that day. I should have noticed how her smile never quite reached her eyes when she congratulated us on hitting it off so well. But I was completely focused on Joanne, swept up in the intoxicating feeling of meeting someone who felt like the missing piece of my soul. By the end of that barbecue, I had asked Joanne out to dinner, and she had said yes with that radiant smile that would become my favorite sight in the world. We dated for 2 years before I proposed, and those were the happiest years of my young adult life. Joanne and I discovered that we shared similar values, compatible dreams, and an easy companionship that made even mundane activities feel special. We could spend hours just talking, sharing stories from our childhoods, our hopes for the future, our fears and insecurities. Joanne had told me about growing up as an only child with parents who worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. She talked about the loneliness of coming home to an empty house every day after school, and how that had shaped her dream of having a big, noisy family of her own someday. She wanted children who would never doubt that they were loved and wanted, children who would always have someone to come home to. I shared my own dreams of building a successful construction business, of creating something lasting that I could be proud of and potentially pass down to my children. I told her about the house I wanted to build for my future family. Nothing too fancy, but solid and comfortable, with a big backyard for children to play in, and a front porch where we could sit in the evenings and watch life go by. Joanne would listen to these dreams with such enthusiasm and encouragement. She would add her own ideas, talking about the vegetable garden she wanted to plant, the breakfast nook where we would eat family meals together, the reading corner where she would tell bedtime stories to our children. Laura was in every milestone Joanne and I shared. She was always there offering her support. We had noticed she didn't have much of her own life, but we figured she just liked to be in people's business. Never in our wildest dreams did we think she was evil. Laura Lorraine had been Joanne's best friend since childhood, but looking back, we realized she had always been a bit possessive of her. Laura was short and plump with strong features that were beautiful in a dark, brooding way. I planned my proposal like a military operation, and Laura was my willing accomplice in every detail. She knew my fiancé's best friend to be her bridal team, and Laura was there for me every step of the way, helping me pick out the perfect ring, suggesting the perfect location, that little gazebo in Piedmont Park where Joanne loved to sit and read on Sunday afternoons. Laura knew Joanne better than anyone, or so I thought at the time. She knew Joanne's favorite flowers, her favorite songs, even the exact words that would make her cry happy tears. For weeks, Laura and I met in secret to plan every aspect of the proposal. We went ring shopping together at 3 different jewelry stores before finding the perfect diamond, a classic solitaire setting that would complement Joanne's elegant but understated style. Laura knew exactly what Joanne would want, down to the specific cut and carat weight that would make her eyes light up without being so ostentatious that Joanne would feel uncomfortable wearing it every day. Laura even helped me plan what I would say, coaching me through different versions of my proposal speech until we found the words that felt authentic and romantic without being overly sentimental. She knew Joanne's favorite Bible verses, her favorite quotes about love and marriage, the specific things that would resonate most deeply with her heart. The day of the proposal, Laura was almost as nervous as I was. She arrived at the park an hour early to make sure everything was perfect. The flowers I had hidden behind the gazebo, the photographer I had hired to capture the moment, the backup plan in case of rain. Laura thought of details that hadn't even occurred to me, like bringing tissues for Joanne's happy tears and having a bottle of water for me in case my mouth got too dry to speak. When I got down on one knee that crisp October evening, with Laura hiding behind a tree, taking pictures, and Joanne's family secretly watching from a distance, Joanne said yes before I could even ask the question. The tears streaming down her face, the way she threw her arms around me, that moment was pure magic. Laura was the first person to congratulate us, wrapping us both in a hug so tight I thought she might never let go. But now, looking back with the knowledge I have about Laura's true nature, I see that hug differently. I remember how long she held on, how her grip on me felt almost possessive. I remember the way she looked at me over Joanne's shoulder, not with the joy of a friend celebrating her best friend's happiness, but with something more complicated and darker. At the time, I interpreted Laura's emotional reaction as proof of how much she loved Joanne and wanted her to be happy. I thought her tears were tears of joy for her best friend finding true love. I didn't recognize them as tears of jealousy, rage, and the beginning of a plan that would ultimately cost Joanne her life. Our wedding was everything Joanne had dreamed of. A beautiful ceremony at the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, followed by a reception that went on until the early morning hours. Joanne was the maid of honor, of course, and she gave a speech that had everyone in tears. She talked about how Joanne deserved all the happiness in the world, how she had never seen two people more perfect for each other, and how she would always be there for us no matter what life threw our way. The wedding planning process had been another opportunity for Laura to insert herself deeply into our lives. She was involved in every decision, from choosing the color scheme to tasting menu options to selecting the music for our first dance. Joanne relied on Laura's opinion for everything, often deferring to her judgment when she couldn't decide between options. Laura seemed to relish her role as the indispensable friend who made everything perfect. She coordinated with vendors, managed RSVPs, handled all the stressful details that could have overwhelmed Joanne during what should have been a joyful time. She even organized Joanne's bachelorette party, planning a weekend getaway that was exactly Joanne's style. Classy, fun, but not too wild. I was grateful for Laura's involvement at the time. Wedding planning can be overwhelming, and having someone as organized and dedicated as Laura helping us navigate all the decisions made everything smoother. I saw her as the perfect maid of honor, someone who truly understood what Joanne wanted and was willing to go above and beyond to make our special day perfect. If I had known then what those words would come to mean, maybe I would have paid closer attention to the look in her eyes when she said them. Maybe I would have noticed how she positioned herself in every wedding photo, always between Joanne and me when possible, her hand often touching one of us. Maybe I would have questioned why someone would be so invested in another person's wedding that they seemed more involved than the bride herself. The first 3 years of our marriage were the happiest of my life. Joanne and I built something beautiful together. We bought our first house, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood in Decatur. Joanne decorated every room with such care and love, always talking about the children we would have someday and how they would fill those empty rooms with laughter and joy. Our house became a gathering place for friends and family. Joanne loved to host dinner parties, holiday celebrations, and casual get-togethers where people felt comfortable and welcome. She had a gift for making anyone feel at home, whether they were meeting her for the first time or had known her for years. Laura was a regular presence at these gatherings, often arriving early to help with preparations and staying late to help with cleanup. She seemed to take genuine pleasure in contributing to our hospitality, bringing dishes that complemented Joanne's menu or flowers from her own garden to use as centerpieces. Joanne would often comment on how blessed we were to have such a devoted friend. "Laura's like the sister I never had," she would say. "I can't imagine going through life without her support and friendship." During this time, Laura was building her career as a cardiac nurse at Emory University Hospital. She worked long, demanding shifts, but always seemed to have energy left over to spend time with us. She would stop by after work to share stories from the hospital, often bringing medical journals or articles she thought might interest Joanne, who was fascinated by Laura's work in healthcare. Laura had a way of making her job sound both noble and exciting. She would tell stories about saving lives, comforting families during medical crises, and working alongside brilliant doctors to perform miraculous treatments. Joanne was incredibly proud of her friend's career, and would often brag about Laura's expertise to other people. Laura is one of the best cardiac nurses in the city. She saves so many lives. I feel safer just knowing I have a friend with her medical knowledge and experience. When Joanne got pregnant, we were over the moon. But when the doctor told us we were having triplets, 3 beautiful baby girls, I thought my heart might explode with happiness. Joanne glowed throughout her pregnancy, even when it got difficult in those final months. Joanne was there constantly, bringing fresh fruit and vegetables, cooking meals when Joanne was too tired, sometimes even spending the night when Joanne was feeling anxious or uncomfortable. The pregnancy was challenging from the beginning. Carrying triplets put enormous strain on Joanne's body, and she experienced more severe symptoms than most expectant mothers. She had morning sickness that lasted well into her second trimester, back pain that made it difficult for her to sleep, and swelling in her feet and hands that worried her doctor. Laura was incredibly knowledgeable about pregnancy complications, probably from her work at the hospital, where she had undoubtedly seen many high-risk pregnancies. She would research Joanne's symptoms, bring her articles about nutrition during multiple pregnancies, and even coordinate with Joanne's obstetrician to make sure she was getting the best possible care. I was grateful for Laura's expertise and support during this time. As a man, I felt helpless watching Joanne struggle with the physical demands of pregnancy. Laura could offer the kind of practical and emotional support that I simply didn't have the knowledge or experience to provide. Laura started bringing Joanne special teas that she said were good for pregnant women, herbal supplements that could help with nausea and fatigue, and fresh fruits that she claimed were packed with the vitamins and minerals that developing babies needed. Joanne trusted Laura's medical knowledge completely and never questioned any of the remedies or suggestions she offered. The day my daughters were born was the most incredible and terrifying day of my life. After 18 hours of labor, Jasmine, Jade, and Joy came into this world, each one more perfect than the last. Joanne was exhausted but radiant, holding our babies with such tenderness and wonder. But the doctors were concerned. The pregnancy and delivery had put tremendous strain on Joanne's heart, and they wanted to monitor her closely. I'll never forget the first time I held all three of my daughters at once. They were so tiny, so perfect, each one with her own distinct personality, even in those first moments of life. Jasmine was the fussiest, crying loudly to make sure everyone knew she had arrived. Jade was the most alert, her eyes wide open and seeming to take in everything around her. Joy was the calmest, content to simply be held and loved. Joanne and I spent hours just staring at them, marveling at the miracle of their existence. We had created three perfect little human beings, three souls that would carry our love forward into the world. Joanne would whisper to them in the quiet moments, telling them how much we wanted them, how long we had dreamed of them, how they were the greatest gifts we could ever receive. The hospital stay was longer than expected because of Joanne's condition, but those first few days felt magical despite the medical concerns. We were cocooned in our little room with our babies, learning their rhythms, figuring out feeding schedules, taking turns holding them so each girl got equal attention. Laura visited every day, bringing flowers for Joanne and small gifts for the babies. She seemed genuinely overjoyed by their arrival, cooing over each girl and already talking about being their favorite Aunt Laura. She brought professional quality photographs of the babies that she had somehow managed to take during their first day, capturing precious moments that Joanne and I had been too overwhelmed to document ourselves. For the first 3 weeks after we brought the babies home, everything seemed fine. We were adjusting to life with 3 newborns, which was overwhelming but magical. Joanne was an incredible mother, somehow managing to keep track of which baby needed what and when. She had this intuitive understanding of each girl's personality and needs that amazed me every day. Laura continued to help out, watching the babies while I was at work or taking night shifts when Joanne was particularly tired. She had taken vacation time from her job at the hospital to help us through the transition, and I was incredibly grateful for her sacrifice. Taking care of triplets was like running a small military operation, and having an extra pair of experienced hands made all the difference. But then Joanne started getting weak. At first, we attributed it to the normal exhaustion of postpartum, especially with 3 babies to care for. But Joanne's tiredness seemed different from normal tiredness. She would get short of breath doing simple things like walking up the stairs or picking up the babies. The doctor said it was normal for new mothers to feel tired, especially with triplets, but something felt wrong. Joanne started having episodes where her heart would race for no reason, or she would feel dizzy and need to sit down suddenly. Sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night, gasping for air, feeling like she couldn't catch her breath. These episodes frightened both of us, but the doctors initially dismissed them as anxiety related to new motherhood and the stress of caring for multiple infants. Laura, with her medical background, was incredibly helpful during this time. She would take Joanne's vital signs when she was having episodes, documenting everything carefully to report to the doctors. She researched postpartum health complications and brought Joanne articles about recovery after multiple births. She seemed to know exactly what questions to ask the doctors and what symptoms to watch for. That's when they diagnosed her with postpartum cardiomyopathy, a rare heart condition that can develop after pregnancy, but her own case was different because it was years after pregnancy. The doctor explained that Joanne's heart muscle had weakened and wasn't pumping blood effectively anymore. They started her on medications and said that with treatment, many women make a complete recovery. But Joanne's condition seemed to get worse instead of better. The diagnosis was devastating. Joanne was only 26 years old, with 3 beautiful babies who needed their mother. The idea that her heart was failing seemed impossible to accept. The doctors tried to reassure us that this condition was treatable, that many women made full recoveries, but Joanne's case seemed to be more severe than most. Laura became even more involved in our care during this time. She would come over every morning to help with the babies while I was at work, bringing Joanne her medications and making sure she was eating and resting. In the evenings, she would often stay for dinner, insisting on cooking while I took care of the babies and Joanne rested. I was so focused on taking care of my wife and daughters that I didn't think to question why someone would dedicate so much of their life to helping us. I just felt grateful. The medications Joanne was taking made her feel awful most of the time. She would be nauseated, dizzy, and exhausted beyond what seemed normal, even for someone with a heart condition. When she mentioned these side effects to her doctors, they would adjust dosages or try different combinations, but nothing seemed to help much.
Laura was incredibly knowledgeable about Joanne's medications. She would research each drug, understand the potential side effects, and even coordinate with the pharmacy to make sure Joanne's prescriptions were filled correctly. She organized Joanne's pill schedule, setting up daily medication organizers to make sure Joanne never missed a dose. "It's so important that you take these exactly as prescribed," Laura would tell Joanne. "Heart medications have to be taken consistently to be effective. Even missing one dose could set back your recovery." As the months passed, Joanne's condition continued to deteriorate. She was in and out of the hospital, and each time she came home, she seemed a little bit weaker. The doctors tried different medications, different treatments, but nothing seemed to help. Joanne would have good days and bad days, but the good days became fewer and further between. During Joanne's hospital stays, Laura would essentially move into our house to help me care for the babies. She would arrive early in the morning before I left for work and stay until late at night after I returned home. She knew the girls' schedules as well as I did, perhaps better. She could anticipate their needs, comfort them when they were fussy, and maintain the routines that Joanne had established. The girls, who were now walking and talking, adored her. They called her Aunt Laura and would run to her with the same excitement they showed me when I came home from work. Laura had been a constant presence in their lives since birth, and to them, she was simply another loving adult who took care of them. I began to rely on Laura more and more heavily as Joanne's condition worsened. She wasn't just helping with childcare anymore. She was managing our entire household. She grocery shopped, cooked meals, did laundry, cleaned the house, and handled all the daily tasks that Joanne was too weak to manage. Laura never complained about the burden this created for her own life. She had effectively put her career on hold to take care of our family, using all her vacation time and then taking unpaid leave when necessary. She claimed that helping us was more important to her than any job, and that Joanne's recovery was her top priority. During this time, Laura started bringing Joanne special meals that she said were designed specifically for people with heart conditions. She would research heart-healthy recipes, shop for organic ingredients, and prepare elaborate meals that were supposed to support Joanne's recovery. Nutrition is so important for healing, Laura would explain, as she served Joanne carefully prepared plates of food. The right foods can actually help strengthen your heart muscle and improve circulation. Joanne trusted Laura's expertise completely and would eat everything Laura prepared for her, even when she wasn't feeling hungry or when the food didn't taste good to her. Laura would encourage Joanne to finish everything on her plate, explaining that her body needed the nutrients, even if her appetite was poor due to her medications. When the girls turned 3, Joanne's condition took a turn for the worse. The doctors said her heart function had declined significantly, and the medications weren't helping anymore. They started talking about more aggressive treatments, maybe even a heart transplant if we could find a donor, but Joanne could see in their eyes what they weren't saying, that time was running out. The decline was rapid and frightening. Joanne went from being weak but functional to being bedridden within a matter of weeks. She could barely walk across the room without becoming breathless and dizzy. Simple activities like brushing her teeth or taking a shower required rest breaks. Laura increased her presence in our home during this final phase of Joanne's illness. She was there almost around the clock, monitoring Joanne's condition, administering medications, and coordinating with her medical team. She slept in our guest room most nights, claiming that Joanne needed constant supervision in case she had a medical emergency. I was grateful for Laura's dedication, but I was also exhausted and overwhelmed by the reality that I might lose my wife. I was trying to balance work responsibilities with caring for Joanne and spending time with my daughters, who were confused and frightened by their mother's declining condition. The girls would ask why Mommy was always sleeping, why she couldn't play with them anymore, why she always had to go to the hospital. Laura would often be the one to comfort them when Joanne was too weak to respond to their needs, reading them stories, helping them with their meals, and maintaining some sense of normalcy in their daily routines. It was on a quiet Thursday evening in March when Joanne called me to sit beside her on our bed. The girls were asleep in their room, and Laura had just left after making dinner and helping with bedtime stories. She took my hands in hers, and I could feel how cold and weak they had become. "Robert," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully." My heart started racing. I knew what was coming, but I wasn't ready to hear it. She continued, tears streaming down her face. "The doctors think I have maybe a few weeks, maybe a month if I'm lucky. But I'm not afraid to go, baby. I'm not afraid because I know our girls have the most amazing father in the world, and they're going to be okay." I started to protest, to tell her not to talk like that we were going to fight this and she was going to get better, but she put her finger to my lips and shook her head. "Listen to me, Robert. After I'm gone, you're going to be tempted to close yourself off, to think that what we had was once in a lifetime and you'll never find it again. But I need you to promise me something." She gripped my hands tighter, finding strength from somewhere deep inside. "Promise me that you won't stop living. Promise me that you'll find love again when you're ready. Those girls need a mother figure in their lives, and you deserve to be happy." I was sobbing now, unable to form words. "But," Joanne continued, her voice getting stronger, "promise me that you'll never let anyone hurt our babies. Promise me that their happiness and safety will always come first, no matter what. They are our legacy, Robert. They are the best parts of both of us, and they deserve to be loved and protected with every fiber of your being." These weren't just words to Joanne. They were a sacred covenant that she was asking me to make. She had spent the past 3 years pouring all her love, wisdom, and dreams into our daughters. She had loved them from before they were born, had sacrificed her own health and energy to give them life, and now she was entrusting me with their future. I promised her everything she asked. I promised to keep living, to find love again when I was ready, and to never let anyone hurt our precious girls. I held her close that night, listening to her heartbeat, praying to God for more time, for a miracle, for anything that would let me keep the love of my life. Joanne passed away peacefully in my arms 3 weeks later, on a sunny April morning while the girls were at daycare. Laura had come to sit with us, and she held my hand while Joanne took her last breath. The grief was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It felt like someone had ripped my heart out of my chest and left me hollow inside. The funeral was beautiful but heartbreaking. The church was packed with people whose lives Joanne had touched, her students and their families, colleagues from the school where she taught, neighbors who had been blessed by her kindness, and friends who had experienced her generous heart. Laura gave another speech, this time about Joanne's legacy and how her love would live on through our daughters. She promised to help me take care of the girls, to be there whenever we needed her, to make sure Joanne's memory was honored in how we raised them. I remember standing at Joanne's graveside, holding my 3-year-old daughter's hands, trying to explain something that I didn't understand myself. How do you tell children that age that their mommy isn't coming home? How do you help them understand death when you're barely holding yourself together? Jasmine kept asking when mommy is going to wake up. Jade wanted to know if mommy is cold in the ground. Joy, always the most intuitive, seemed to understand that something permanent and terrible had happened, but she couldn't articulate her feelings. She just clung to my leg and cried whenever anyone tried to talk to her about Joanne. The days immediately following the funeral were a blur of casseroles from neighbors, sympathy cards that I couldn't bear to read, and the overwhelming reality of being a single parent to 3 grieving toddlers. I felt like I was drowning in responsibilities and emotions that I wasn't equipped to handle. Laura was incredible during this time. She had taken extended bereavement leave from her job to help us through the transition. She would arrive early in the morning to help get the girls ready for daycare, and she would be there when I picked them up in the evening. She helped me establish routines, taught me how to braid their hair properly, showed me how to pack their lunches with foods that they would actually eat. But more than the practical help, Laura provided emotional support that I desperately needed. She had loved Joanne deeply, and she understood my grief in a way that other people couldn't. She would sit with me in the evenings after the girls went to bed, listening as I talked about my fears of failing as a single parent, my guilt over Joanne's death, my panic about raising daughters without a mother.
Joanne chose well when she chose you, Laura would tell me during those dark nights. You're going to be an amazing father to those girls. They're going to grow up knowing how much their parents love them, and that's the most important thing you can give them. After the funeral, I thought I might drown in grief and responsibility. Suddenly, I was a single father to 3-year-old triplets, trying to figure out how to be both mother and father while dealing with my own devastating loss. The girls were too young to fully understand what had happened, but they knew something was wrong. They would ask for mommy constantly, and I would have to explain over and over again that mommy had gone to heaven to be with the angels. The hardest part was bedtime. Joanne had always been the one to read them stories, sing them lullabies, and tuck them in with kisses and promises that she would see them in the morning. Now, when I tried to maintain those routines, the girls would cry for their mommy, asking why she couldn't come say goodnight anymore. I was determined to honor Joanne's memory by being the best father possible. I learned to cook by watching YouTube videos, practicing different recipes until I could make the girls' favorite meals. Joanne had been an excellent cook, and I wanted to continue serving them the foods they were used to. I spent hours watching cooking tutorials, practicing techniques, and gradually building a repertoire of meals that the girls would eat without complaint. I figured out how to help with their preschool homework, which consisted mainly of coloring sheets and simple learning activities. I learned to handle bedtime stories for 3 demanding little personalities, reading the same books over and over again because each girl had her favorites that she wanted to hear every night. The daily arguments between sisters were perhaps the most challenging aspect of single parenting. Jasmine and Jade seemed to fight constantly over toys, attention, and privileges. Joy was usually the peacemaker, trying to resolve conflicts between her sisters, but sometimes all three of them would melt down at the same time, leaving me feeling overwhelmed and inadequate. Laura was there through all of it, offering advice, taking over when I needed a break, and providing the kind of maternal guidance that I simply couldn't give. She understood girl things that I didn't know anything about, which hair products to use, how to handle questions about why they looked different from their daddy, what to do when they had nightmares about their mother. We established traditions that became sacred in our house. Friday nights were movie nights, complete with popcorn and ice cream sundaes. I would let each girl take turns choosing the movie, which usually meant watching the same Disney films repeatedly until I knew every song by heart. Saturday mornings were for pancakes and cartoons, followed by trips to the park or the zoo when the weather was nice. The girls loved these outings, running around playgrounds and burning off energy, while I tried to keep track of all three of them simultaneously. Sunday evenings were for family game nights, though with 3-year-olds, the games were pretty simple. We would play memory games with picture cards, build puzzles together, or have dance parties in the living room. These times were precious to me because they were when the girls seemed happiest and most like their normal selves. I lived for those girls. Every decision I made was centered around what was best for them. When my construction business started growing and I had opportunities to expand, I turned them down because they would have required too much travel. When friends tried to set me up on dates, I politely declined. I wasn't ready, and more importantly, my girls needed all of my attention and energy. My business had been doing well before Joanne's death, and I was grateful that I had the financial stability to focus on my daughters without worrying about money. I had built a solid reputation in the construction industry, and I had reliable employees who could handle most projects without requiring constant supervision from me. But I made the conscious decision to scale back my business activities to focus on parenting. I turned down large contracts that would have required me to travel or work long hours. I hired additional staff to handle day-to-day operations so that I could be present for school events, doctor's appointments, and all the other activities that single parents have to juggle. Laura was there through all of it. At first, I was grateful, but also a little uncomfortable with how much she was helping. I didn't want to become dependent on someone else, and I worried that it wasn't fair to her to spend so much time taking care of my family instead of living her own life. Laura, I would say regularly during those first few months, "You don't have to do this. The girls and I can manage. You should be out there dating, building your own life, not stuck here playing house with us." But Laura would always insist that this was exactly where she wanted to be. "Robert, Joanne was my best friend. Taking care of you and the girls is the last gift I can give her. Besides," she would add with a smile, "these girls are like my own children. I love them too much to just walk away now." And it was true. The girls adored Laura. She had been a constant presence in their lives since they were born, and after Joanne passed away, she became even more important to them. They would run to her with their scraped knees and hurt feelings, include her in their games, and beg her to read them stories at bedtime. Laura seemed to genuinely enjoy spending time with the girls. She would get down on the floor and play with their dolls, help them build elaborate structures with building blocks, and engage in the kind of imaginative play that came naturally to Joanne, but that I sometimes struggled with. She also had a way of managing their behavior that was both firm and loving. When they acted out or had tantrums, Laura would handle the situation calmly and effectively, redirecting their energy towards more positive activities. She seemed to understand child psychology in a way that helped her connect with each girl's individual personality. As the months turned into the first year after Joanne's death, Laura's behavior started to shift in ways that were harder to ignore. She began staying overnight more frequently, claiming that it was easier since she would be there so early in the morning anyway. She had been staying in our guest room occasionally for months, usually when one of the girls was sick or when I had early work commitments. But the frequency of these overnight stays increased gradually. What had been once or twice a month became once or twice a week, and eventually it felt like Laura was living with us more than she was living at her own apartment. I tried to maintain appropriate boundaries. I would insist on cleaning up after meals, on putting the girls to bed myself, on handling the bedtime routines that felt too intimate for someone who wasn't their parent. But Laura had a way of making me feel guilty about excluding her from these moments. "Robert," she would say, hurt evident in her voice, "I've been here for everything else. These girls are my daughters too. Are you really going to shut me out from bedtime stories?" And she was right in a way. She had been there for everything. She had earned her place in our lives through 2 years of constant, selfless service. The girls expected her to be part of their bedtime routine. When I tried to exclude her, they would ask where Aunt Laura was and why she couldn't come say goodnight anymore. The girls had come to depend on Laura's presence in ways that made it difficult for me to establish boundaries without upsetting them. They expected her to be there for their important moments, to help them with their problems and to participate in their daily activities. It was around this time that Laura started dressing differently when she was at our house. Gone were the casual jeans and t-shirts she used to wear. Instead, she would show up in dresses that hugged her curves, with her hair styled and makeup perfectly applied. When I would come home from work, she would greet me at the door like a wife welcoming her husband home, taking my briefcase and asking about my day while the girls played nearby. These changes in Laura's appearance and behavior made me uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to address them without seeming ungrateful for everything she had done for us. Laura had literally saved my life in those early months after Joanne's death. She had helped me become the father my girls needed. How could I suddenly tell Laura that her behavior was inappropriate? I also questioned my own perceptions. Was I reading too much into innocent gestures of friendship and care? Was I being paranoid or ungrateful? Laura had devoted years of her life to helping our family recover from tragedy. Maybe she was just trying to make our home feel warm and welcoming. The situation came to a head on a day that I had come home early from work due to a canceled meeting. The girls were still at school, and I walked into my house to find Laura in my kitchen wearing a dress that was far too revealing for an afternoon of childcare. She had prepared lunch for two, set with our good china and cloth napkins, and had soft music playing in the background. "Robert," she said, clearly flustered by my unexpected arrival, "you're home early. I thought maybe we could have a nice lunch together before the girls get home." I stood there, looking at this elaborate setup, at Laura's expectant face, and I finally understood what had been happening. This wasn't just about helping with the girls anymore. This was about something else entirely. "Laura," I said carefully, "what is this?" She took a step toward me, her eyes bright with hope and something I didn't want to recognize. "Robert, we've been dancing around this for months. You have to feel it too, how natural this is, how right it feels for us to be together like this." My mouth dried. "Laura, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Has there?" she interrupted, moving closer. "Robert, look at what we've built together. Look at how happy the girls are, how well we work as a team. Joanne would want this for you. She would want you to find love again, and who better than someone who already loves those girls as much as their mother did?" The mention of Joanne's name in this context made my stomach turn. "Laura, I'm grateful for everything you've done for us, but what?" she said, and for the first time I heard an edge in her voice that I had never noticed before. "But you'd rather stay alone forever, living like a monk, denying yourself happiness? Joanne didn't want that for you, Robert. She told me herself." This stopped me cold. "What do you mean, she told you herself?" Laura's expression softened, and she reached for my hands. "The night before she passed away, when you had stepped out to get some air, Joanne and I talked. She made me promise to take care of you and the girls. But more than that, she said she hoped that someday you would find love again, and she thought that maybe it would be with me, her best friend that loved her till death." I felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. Had Joanne really said that? I couldn't remember exactly what had happened that night. I had been so exhausted and grief-stricken that everything was a blur. She said, "I knew you and the triplets better than anyone," Laura continued, her voice soft and persuasive. She said, "I understood what kind of father you were, what kind of man you were, and that she trusted me to love you the way you deserve to be loved." I was confused, emotionally drained, and completely unprepared for this conversation. Part of me wondered if Laura was right. Maybe Joanne had said those things. Maybe this was what Joanne had wanted when she told me to find love again. And there was no denying that Laura had proven her love for our family through her actions over the past 2 years. "I don't know," I said honestly. "This is all so unexpected. I never thought of you in that way." "But you could," Laura said, and there was something almost desperate in her voice. "Robert, we already live like a family. We already love each other, just not in that way yet. It would be so easy, so natural. The girls already see me as their mother figure. We wouldn't have to change anything except to acknowledge what's already there." Over the following weeks, Laura's campaign to win my heart became more intense. She would find reasons to touch my hand or my arm when she was talking to me. She would cook my favorite meals and set romantic scenes for dinner after the girls had gone to bed. She would talk about how the girls had mentioned wanting a mommy and how they had said they wished Aunt Laura could be their new mommy. I was torn. On one hand, Laura's logic made sense. The girls did love her, and they were thriving under her care. She had proven her dedication to our family beyond any doubt, and Joanne already told me to give love a chance. And I was lonely, lonelier than I had ever admitted to myself. The thought of having a partner again, someone to share the load of parenting and life decisions, was incredibly appealing. Plus, the fact that Joanne told Laura all that. But something felt wrong about the whole situation. Maybe it was guilt over Joanne's memory? Or maybe it was just that I hadn't processed my grief enough to be ready for a new relationship. I kept thinking about Joanne's words about not letting anyone hurt our girls, and while I had no reason to think Laura would ever hurt them, something in my gut was telling me to be cautious. The girls, however, seemed to have no such reservations. One evening at dinner, 5-year-old Jasmine looked up from her spaghetti and said, "Daddy, why can't Aunt Laura be our real mommy? She does everything a mommy does." Jade nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, and she makes the best pancakes, and she knows how to do our hair pretty, and she reads us the best stories." Joy, who was always the most thoughtful of the three, added quietly, "And she loves us like a mommy does. I can tell." Laura looked at me across the table with tears in her eyes, and I could see how much those words meant to her. But I also noticed something else, a look of satisfaction, as if this was exactly the outcome she had been working toward. That night, after the girls were asleep and Laura had gone home, I sat in my bedroom looking at Joanne's picture on my nightstand. I talked to her the way I had every night since she passed away, asking for guidance, for signs, for anything that would help me know what to do. "Joanne," I whispered, "if you really did want this for me, if you really thought Laura was the right person to help me raise our girls, give me a sign. Help me know what's right." I don't know if it was grief, loneliness, or genuine belief that this was what Joanne had wanted, but over the next few months, I slowly began to open my heart to the possibility of a relationship with Laura. She was patient and understanding, never pushing too hard, always letting me set the pace. We started having adult conversations after the girls went to bed, talking about our hopes and dreams, our fears about the future. Laura shared stories about her childhood, her past relationships, her dreams of having a family of her own. She talked about how much she had loved Joanne, how devastated she had been when Joanne died, and how caring for me and the girls had given her life meaning again. After a while, Laura and I had been in a romantic relationship for about 6 months. It wasn't the passionate, all-consuming love I had shared with Joanne, but it was comfortable and safe. Laura understood my life in a way that no stranger could, and she loved my daughters genuinely and deeply. When I proposed to Laura on the 2nd anniversary of Joanne's death, it felt like the natural progression of what we had built together. The girls were overjoyed, immediately starting to plan their roles in our wedding and talking excitedly about finally having a mommy again. Our wedding was much smaller and more subdued than Joanne's and mine had been. We held it in our backyard with just close family and friends in attendance. The girls served as flower girls, wearing matching pink dresses that Laura had carefully chosen. In their innocent joy and excitement, I felt like maybe I was doing the right thing. Maybe this was exactly what Joanne had envisioned for our family's future. But almost immediately after the wedding, things began to change in ways I never could have anticipated. The Lord that had been so patient and nurturing during our courtship seemed to transform overnight into someone I barely recognized. It started with small things. Laura would snap at the girls for normal childhood behavior that had never bothered her before. If they spilled juice on the counter or left toys in the living room, she would react with irritation that seemed disproportionate to the offense. "Girls, you need to make use of your senses," she would say sharply. "This is our home now, and we all need to take better care of it." When I questioned her about these reactions, Laura would apologize and claim that she was just adjusting to being a stepmother instead of a family friend. "It's different now, Robert," she would explain. "Before, I could just be the fun aunt who spoiled them. Now I have to actually parent them, teach them responsibility." I accepted this explanation because it made logical sense. But as the weeks went on, Laura's behavior toward the girls became increasingly strict and cold. She implemented new rules that seemed designed more to control than to teach. The girls had to ask permission before getting snacks from the kitchen. They had to keep their bedroom door open at all times. They weren't allowed to have friends over without Laura's specific approval, which she rarely gave. Most concerning to me was how Laura seemed to discourage the girls from coming to me with their problems or concerns. When Jade scraped her knee playing in the backyard and came running to me for comfort, Laura intercepted her. "Jade, you need to come to me first when you're hurt," she said firmly. "I'm your mother now, and mothers take care of boo-boos." I tried to address this with Laura privately, explaining that I didn't want the girls to feel like they couldn't come to me when they needed something, but Laura became defensive, accusing me of undermining her authority as their new mother. "Robert, you asked me to be their mother, and that's what I'm trying to do, but you can't expect me to take on all the responsibilities of motherhood while you still get to be the only parent they turn to. It doesn't work that way." Again, her logic seemed sound, and I began to doubt my own instincts. Maybe I was being overprotective. Maybe I needed to step back and let Laura establish her role as their mother. Around this time, my construction business was experiencing unprecedented growth. A major development project had come through that would require me to oversee operations at a new site about 3 hours away. It was a huge opportunity that could secure our financial future and provide for the girls' college educations and beyond. Laura was incredibly supportive of this opportunity, encouraging me to take on the project, even though it would mean spending several days a week away from home. "Robert, this is exactly the kind of opportunity Joanne would have wanted you to pursue," she said. "She would never want you to hold back your career because of childcare concerns. That's why you have me now, so you can focus on providing for our family without worrying about the day-to-day details." She insisted on taking over the school drop-offs and pickups, the homework supervision, and all the other daily tasks of parenting. She created detailed schedules and systems, promising to keep me updated on everything that happened while I was away. "I want you to focus completely on work when you're there. Don't worry about calling to check in constantly. I'll handle everything here, and I'll call you if there's anything important you need to know." Laura also made a specific request that at first seemed sweet, but later would prove to be crucial. "Robert," she said, "I know this sounds silly, but I love planning special homecomings for you. I want to prepare your favorite meal, maybe run you a hot bath, make sure the house is perfect for your return. Could you just let me know in advance when you're coming home? I want everything to be special for you." This request made sense to me at the time. Laura had always been thoughtful about details, and I was touched that she wanted to make my homecoming special. For the first few months of this new arrangement, everything seemed to be going smoothly. Laura would give me updates about the girls' activities and schoolwork when I called in the evenings. She would text me pictures of them playing or doing homework. When I came home on weekends, the house was always immaculate, dinner was prepared, and the girls seemed happy to see me. But there were small things that bothered me, though I couldn't quite put my finger on what was wrong. The girls seemed more subdued than they used to be. They were less likely to come running to me with excited stories about their day or to crawl into my lap for cuddles while we watched TV. When I asked them about school or their friends, they would give short, careful answers instead of their usual animated chatter. When I tried to engage them in our old traditions like Saturday morning pancakes or Sunday game nights, they seemed distracted and less enthusiastic than before. I mentioned these concerns to Laura, who had reasonable explanations for everything. "Robert, they're growing up," she said. 6-year-olds are naturally less cuddly than they were when they were younger. And they're adjusting to having more structure and responsibility now that I'm here full-time. It's actually a sign of maturity. When I suggested that maybe we should have a family meeting to discuss how everyone was feeling about our new family dynamic, Laura discouraged it. "Robert, you don't want to create problems where none exist," she said. "The girls are fine. They're just learning to be more independent. If you make a big deal about imaginary issues, you'll create real problems." I wanted to believe Laura, because the alternative, that something was wrong in my home and I was missing it, was too frightening to contemplate. These were my babies, my most precious treasures, and I had promised Joanne that I would always protect them. If they were unhappy or being mistreated in any way, I should have been able to sense it, shouldn't I? But the truth was that I was spending more time away from home than ever before. The work project was demanding and stressful, requiring my full attention and energy. When I came home on weekends, I was exhausted and focused on making the most of our limited time together. I wasn't looking for problems. I was looking for reassurance that everything was okay so I could continue working toward our family's future. This went on for almost a year. The work project was nearing completion, and I was proud of what we had accomplished. The financial security it provided meant that I could slow down and spend more time at home once it was finished. I was looking forward to reconnecting with my daughters and maybe taking a family vacation to celebrate. It was during this time that Laura began dropping hints about wanting access to our joint finances and also suggesting we get a surrogate since she has fertility problems and her egg can be used. She would mention expenses for the girls or household needs, suggesting that it would be easier if she could just handle these purchases herself instead of having to ask me for money or wait for me to be home to take care of them. "Robert, I feel awkward having to ask you for money every time the girls need new shoes or school supplies. It makes me feel like an employee instead of your wife." I was resistant to this idea at first, not because I didn't trust Laura with money, but because Joanne and I had always maintained some financial independence even within our marriage. We had joint accounts for household expenses and savings, but we also had our individual accounts for personal spending. But Laura was persistent, and her arguments were compelling. She was handling all the household management and childcare responsibilities while I was away. It did make sense for her to have easy access to funds for the girls' needs. After months of discussion, I finally agreed to set up a joint account that Laura could have access for household and child-related expenses. I decided to surprise her with the account setup instead of making it into a big negotiation, and also agree to the surrogacy route. I would come home early from the work site, take her out to dinner, and present her with the account information as a gesture of trust and appreciation for everything she was doing for our family, and also say yes to having a baby. I was actually excited about this surprise. I imagined Laura's face lighting up when I told her. I thought it would be a romantic gesture that would reinforce our partnership and maybe help us reconnect after all the time I had been spending away from home. I finished my work at the site a day early and decided to make the 3-hour drive home that evening instead of waiting until the next day as planned. I was looking forward to seeing Laura's reaction and maybe having a quiet evening together after the girls went to bed. It was raining heavily that April night as I drove through our neighborhood toward home. The familiar streets looked different in the storm, dark and slick with water streaming down from overflowing gutters. As I turned onto our street, I was thinking about how surprised Laura would be to see me, imagining her excitement about the joint account news. But what I saw as I pulled into our driveway made my blood run cold and changed everything I thought I knew about the woman I had married. There was a car parked in front of our house, a car I didn't recognize. The house was mostly dark, except for lights coming from our bedroom window. And there, huddled together on our front porch in the pouring rain, were my 3 little girls. They were soaked through, their pajamas clinging to their small bodies, their hair plastered to their heads with rainwater. Jasmine, Jade, and Joy were holding on to each other, shivering and crying in the storm. The moment they saw my headlights, they came running toward my car, splashing through puddles in their bare feet, their faces lit up with relief and desperate joy. "Daddy! Daddy! You came back! We knew you would come back!" I scooped all 3 of them into my arms, feeling their cold, wet bodies trembling against mine. They were clinging to me like they were drowning and I was their lifeline. "What are you doing outside?" I asked, my voice shaking with fear and rage. "Why aren't you in the house? Where is Laura?" 6-year-old Jasmine looked up at me with eyes that seemed far too old for her young face. "Daddy, there's a man in there with Mommy Laura. She told us to go outside and not come back in until he left." Jade nodded, water dripping from her chin. "Daddy, she said that if we told you about the man, something bad would happen to you and to us." Joy, my quietest daughter, whispered, "Daddy, this has happened before. Lots of times when you're not here." My heart felt like it was going to explode in my chest. I looked at my babies, my precious girls who I had sworn to protect, and realized that I had failed them in the worst possible way. While I was working to secure their future, they had been living in a situation that was damaging them in ways I couldn't even begin to understand. I carried them to the car and turned on the heat, wrapped them in the emergency blankets I kept in the trunk. "Stay right here," I told them. "Lock the doors and don't get out no matter what happens. Daddy is going to take care of this." I walked up to the front door of the house that I had bought for Joanne, the house where we had planned to raise our children together, the house where I thought my daughters were safe and loved. My hands were shaking as I put my key in the lock, not from cold, but from a rage unlike anything I had ever experienced. The sounds coming from our bedroom confirmed what I already knew but didn't want to believe. I walked through my own house like a stranger, seeing it through new eyes. The family photos on the walls, the girls' artwork on the refrigerator, the cozy living room where we had spent so many evenings together. All of it felt like a lie now. I opened the bedroom door without knocking, and there was Laura in bed with a man I had never seen before. They were so wrapped up in each other that they didn't notice me at first. I stood there for a moment, watching the woman I had trusted with my children's lives, the woman I had married because I thought she loved my family, betraying everything we had built together. When Laura finally saw me, the look on her face wasn't shame or remorse, it was annoyance at being interrupted. "Robert, you're home early. I thought you weren't coming back until tomorrow." The man in my bed had the decency to look embarrassed, grabbing his clothes and mumbling apologies as he headed for the bathroom, but Laura just sat there, looking at me like I was the one who had done something wrong by coming home to my own house. "How long?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. "How long what?" Laura replied, but there was a defiance in her tone that I had never heard before. "How long have you been bringing men into my house while my daughters were here?" Laura shrugged, like it was no big deal. "Robert, you're never here anymore. What did you expect? I have needs too." The casualness of her response, the complete lack of remorse or concern for what this meant for our family, hit me like a physical blow. My daughters were outside in the rain, Laura, in the rain. They could have gotten sick, they could have been hurt, they could have been taken by someone. How could you put them outside while you did this? "They're fine," Laura said dismissively. "A little rain never hurt anyone. Besides, they know not to bother me when I have company." Company. She called her affair partners company and talked about it like she was hosting a dinner party instead of destroying our family. "This is over," I said, my voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions raging inside me. "Pack your things and get out of my house. Tonight." Laura laughed. Actually laughed. "Robert, you're never being serious. You're going to throw away our marriage because of one mistake?" "One mistake?" I stared at her in disbelief. "My daughters just told me this has happened multiple times. You've been exposing them to this, traumatizing them, putting them at risk. This isn't a mistake, Laura. This is who you are." The man emerged from the bathroom, fully dressed and clearly eager to leave this uncomfortable situation. Laura didn't even acknowledge him as he slipped out of the bedroom and left the house. "Robert, let's be rational about this," Laura said, finally getting out of bed and reaching for her robe. "You're upset right now, and rightfully so, but we can work through this. Think about the girls. They need stability. They need a mother figure." "They need protection from you," I replied. "I want you out of this house tonight. We'll figure out the legal details later, but I don't want you around my children for one more second." Laura's demeanor changed then, and I caught a glimpse of something cold and calculating that I had never seen before. "Robert, you might want to reconsider that. I know things about this family, about Joanne, about you. Things that could make your life very complicated if we have to go through an ugly divorce." Her words sent a chill down my spine, but I didn't have time to process what she might mean by that threat. My daughters were still sitting in the car, traumatized and wet, needing their father to take care of them. "Get out," I said simply. "We'll deal with everything else through lawyers." I left her there and went back to my girls, who were huddled together in the back seat of my car like refugees from their own home. The sight of them there, so small and vulnerable, made me want to scream at the sky for the injustice of it all. I took them inside, ran warm baths for each of them, and tucked them into their beds with extra blankets and their favorite stuffed animals. They clung to me like they were afraid I might disappear again. "Daddy, are you going to go away again?" Jade asked, her voice small and scared. "No, baby girl, I promised," stroking her hair. "Daddy is going to be here from now on. I'm never leaving you like that again." "Is Mommy Laura going to live somewhere else now?" Jasmine asked. I took a deep breath, trying to find words that would help them understand without adding to their trauma. "Yes, sweetheart. Laura isn't going to live with us anymore. It's going to be just us four again, like before. Joy, always the most perceptive, looked at me with those wise little eyes. Daddy, Laura was mean to us when you weren't here. She said things that made us scared. My heart broke all over again. I'm so sorry, baby. Daddy should have known. Daddy should have protected you better. It's okay, Daddy, Joy said, reaching up to pat my cheek with her small hand. You didn't know. She was good at pretending when you were here. Over the next few days, as I stayed home from work to help my daughters process what had happened, the full scope of Laura's deception began to emerge. The girls, feeling safe to speak openly for the first time in months, told me stories that made my blood boil. Laura had been emotionally abusing them whenever I wasn't around. She would scream at them for minor infractions, tell them they were ungrateful and spoiled, compare them unfavorably to other children. She had forbidden them from calling me when I was away, saying that I was too busy and important to be bothered with their whining. She had been bringing different men to the house regularly, always sending the girls outside or to their rooms with strict instructions not to come out. She had told them that if they ever mentioned these visits to me, something terrible would happen to our family. Most heartbreakingly, Laura had been systematically erasing Joanne's memory from our home and our lives. She had packed away Joanne's photos while I was gone, telling the girls that looking at pictures of their dead mother was unhealthy. She had thrown away some of Joanne's belongings that I had kept for the girls, claiming she was helping them move on. I was devastated by my failure to protect them, but I was also incredibly proud of my daughter's resilience. Despite everything they had endured, they had held on to their love for each other and their faith that their daddy would come home and make things right. The divorce proceedings began immediately. Laura contested everything, trying to claim spousal support and even joint custody of the girls. Her lawyer painted me as an absent father who had abandoned his family for work, arguing that Laura had been the primary caregiver and deserved to maintain a relationship with the children. But the evidence was overwhelming. The girls' testimonies, combined with documentation of Laura's affairs and emotional abuse, made it clear that she was unfit to have any role in their lives. The divorce was finalized within 6 months, with Laura receiving minimal financial settlement and no custody or visitation rights. I thought that was the end of it. I thought we could finally move on and rebuild our lives. I had no idea that the worst was still to come. Shortly after the divorce was finalized, the girls began having nightmares. At first, I attributed this to the trauma they had experienced with Laura, but these weren't typical anxiety dreams. These were specific, detailed dreams about their mother, Joanne. It started with Jasmine waking up crying one night, saying she had dreamed that Joanne was trying to tell her something important, but she couldn't understand what it was. Then Jade began having dreams where Joanne appeared upset and worried, pointing at Laura and shaking her head. But it was Joy's dream that made me pay serious attention. She woke up screaming one morning, and when I rushed to her bedside, she grabbed my shirt with tiny fists and said, "Daddy, Mommy Joanne was trying to warn us. In my dream, Laura was hurting Mommy. She was putting bad medicine in Mommy's food." I tried to rationalize these dreams as the girls' way of processing their complicated feelings about Laura and their grief over Joanne. Children often have vivid dreams during times of stress, and they had certainly been through more than any child should ever endure. But the dreams continued, and they became more specific and disturbing. Jasmine dreamed that she saw Laura punching Mommy's heart. Jade dreamed that Laura was putting poison in Mommy's fruit. Joy had the most detailed dream of all, describing Laura mixing bad stuff into Joanne's medication bottles. These dreams were so consistent and so specific that they began to haunt me during my waking hours. I found myself thinking back to Joanne's illness, remembering how Laura had been so involved in her care. Laura had brought her fruits and vegetables every day. Laura had organized her medications. Laura had prepared many of her meals during those final months. I told myself I was being paranoid, that grief and stress were making me imagine conspiracies where there were no existence. Joanne had died of postpartum cardiomyopathy, a legitimate medical condition that her doctors had diagnosed and treated. The fact that the treatment hadn't worked didn't mean anything sinister had occurred. But the dreams kept coming, and they were affecting the girl's sleep and emotional well-being. I decided to take them to a child psychologist to help them process their trauma and hopefully put an end to these disturbing nightmares. Dr. Tanya James was a kind, experienced therapist who specialized in helping children recover from trauma. She met with each of the girls individually and then spoke with me about her observations. Mr. Johnson, your daughters have indeed experienced trauma from their stepmother's treatment of them, but these dreams they're having about their biological mother, they're unusually specific and consistent for typical anxiety dreams. What do you mean? I asked. Children who experience trauma sometimes have difficulty distinguishing between reality and fantasy, but usually their dreams are more symbolic or chaotic. The details your daughters are describing, the specific methods of poisoning, the deliberate nature of the actions, these are remarkably coherent for children their age. Dr. James recommended that we continue therapy to help the girls process their experiences, but she also suggested something that surprised me.
Mr. Johnson, have you ever considered that your daughters might be trying to tell you something important? Children are often more perceptive than adults give them credit for. They notice things that adults miss, especially in their own homes. That night, I sat in my bedroom looking at Joanne's photo and really thinking about her illness for the first time since her death. I had been so focused on grieving and raising the girls that I had never questioned the progression of her condition or the effectiveness of her treatment. But now, with Dr. James's words echoing in my mind and my daughter's dreams replaying over and over, I began to remember things that seemed insignificant at the time, but took on new meaning in light of what I now knew about Laura's true character. I remembered how Joanne's condition had seemed to worsen after she started Laura's special heart-healthy meals. I remembered how Joanne had sometimes complained that her medications made her feel worse instead of better, and how Laura had always reassured her that this was normal. I remembered how Laura had been the one to bring Joanne's medications to the hospital when Joanne was admitted for what would be her final stay. Most disturbing of all, I remembered the conversation I had overheard between Laura and Joanne's doctor during one of Joanne's hospital visits. The doctor had mentioned that Joanne's blood work showed some unusual results, but Laura had quickly dismissed his concerns, saying that Joanne had always had unusual reactions to medications. At the time, I had been grateful for Laura's knowledge and advocacy. Now I wondered if she had been covering up evidence of something far more sinister. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that my daughter's dreams weren't just trauma responses. They were their young minds trying to process and communicate something they had witnessed but hadn't understood at the time. I decided to do something that felt both necessary and terrifying. I contacted the police to request that Joanne's death be investigated. Detective Maria Jones was a seasoned investigator who had handled numerous suspicious death cases. When I explained the situation to her, my daughter's consistent dreams, Laura's recent behavior and deception, the questions I now had about Joanne's treatment, she took my concerns seriously. Mr. Johnson, Detective Jones said, I understand that this is difficult for you to consider, but given what you've told me about your ex-wife's character and your daughter's statements, I think it's worth looking into. We can request an exhumation and autopsy to test for substances that wouldn't have been detected during the original examination. The thought of disturbing Joanne's final rest was agonizing, but the possibility that she had been murdered, and that her killer had lived in our home, cared for our children, and shared my bed, was even worse. The exhumation and autopsy took place 3 weeks later. During that time, I struggled with doubt and guilt. Was I dishonoring Joanne's memory by pursuing this investigation? Was I traumatizing my daughters further by giving credence to their nightmares? Was I allowing my anger at Laura to drive me to make accusations I couldn't prove? But when Detective Jones called me with the preliminary results, I knew I had made the right decision. "Mr. Johnson, I need you to come to the station. We found something." The toxicology report revealed traces of digitalis in Joanne's tissue samples, a substance that can be extremely dangerous for people with heart conditions. In small doses, digitalis can be used medicinally to treat certain heart problems, but in larger doses, or when given to someone with Joanne's specific condition, it can cause exactly the kind of heart failure that had killed her. The levels we found suggest chronic poisoning over a period of months. Someone was giving your wife digitalis regularly, probably in her food or drinks. Given her heart condition, it would have appeared to be natural progression of her illness. I felt like the ground had opened up beneath me. Laura hadn't just betrayed our marriage and abused my children, she had murdered my wife. She had slowly, methodically poisoned Joanne while pretending to care for her, all while planning to take her place in our family. We need to bring Laura in for questioning. But Mr. Johnson, I need you to be prepared for the possibility that she might not confess. This kind of evidence can be explained away by a good defense attorney. We need more. As if the universe was responding to our need for more evidence, that same week I received a phone call that would provide the final piece of the puzzle. It was from Mrs. Annie, the security guard at the girls' school. She sounded nervous and apologetic when she called. "Mr. Johnson, I hope I'm not overstepping, but there's something I think you should know. It's about an incident that happened a few months ago when your wife was still picking up the girls." My heart started racing. "What kind of incident?" "Well, sir, we had a situation where some men approached the school asking questions about your daughters. They seemed to be casing the area, figuring out pickup times and routines. We were suspicious, so we detained them and called the police." I felt cold all over. What happened to these men? "They were arrested, but here's the thing, Mr. Johnson. When we tried to contact you about the incident, your wife Laura said she would handle everything. She told us not to bother you because you were dealing with work stress. She said she would follow up with the police and keep us updated." Mrs. Annie paused, and I could hear the guilt in her voice. "Mr. Johnson, we never heard back from her about this incident. The police case went cold because no one followed up. We assumed you had decided not to press charges, but now that I think about it, we never actually spoke to you directly." I thanked Mrs. Annie and immediately called Detective Jones to report this new information. She was very interested in this development and promised to look into it immediately. 2 days later, Detective Jones called me with news that made my blood run cold. The men who had been arrested for casing my daughter's school had been released due to lack of follow-up from the family. But the police had kept their personal effects, including cell phones that revealed text message conversations with Laura.
Mr. Johnson, your ex-wife hired these men to kidnap your daughters. The plan was to take them while she had an alibi, then make it look like a random abduction. Based on the text messages, the ultimate goal wasn't ransom. It was to eliminate the girls permanently. I couldn't breathe. You mean she wanted to... Yes, sir. She wanted your daughters killed. The only reason the plan didn't work was because you came home unexpectedly that night and caught her with another man. The kidnapping was supposed to happen that day. The full scope of Laura's evil was finally clear. She had murdered Joanne to clear the way to marry me. She had planned to kill my daughters to eliminate any obstacles to inheriting whatever wealth I had accumulated. She had manipulated me, abused my children, and nearly succeeded in destroying everyone I loved. The police arrested Laura within hours of discovering this evidence. When confronted with the toxicology results and the text messages, she initially tried to deny everything. But eventually, faced with overwhelming proof, she broke down and confessed to everything. The story she told was even chilling than I had imagined. Laura had been in love with me since before I met Joanne, but I had never noticed her as anything more than a friend. When Joanne and I got together, Laura had been consumed with jealousy and rage. Joanne had everything, Laura said during her confession, her voice flat and emotionless. She was prettier than me, more charming than me. She got the man I loved, the life I wanted, even though I was the better person. It wasn't fair. Laura had spent years plotting her revenge. She had befriended Joanne not out of genuine affection, but to get close to our family and wait for her opportunity. When Joanne got pregnant, Laura saw her chance. I knew the pregnancy would put stress on her heart. All I had to do was make sure that stress was fatal. A little digitalis in her fruit, in her vitamins, in her special meals, just enough to weaken her heart until it couldn't take anymore. Throughout Joanne's illness, Laura had played the perfect supportive friend, all while slowly murdering her. She had manipulated Joanne's medications, replaced heart-healthy supplements with substances that would worsen her condition, and even influenced Joanne's medical care by providing false information to her doctors. The night before Joanne died, she told me she suspected something was wrong. She said she felt like someone was trying to hurt her, but she couldn't figure out who or how. I told her she was just scared because of her heart condition, that it was normal to feel paranoid when you're sick. But Joanne's suspicions had made Laura nervous, so she had accelerated her timeline. The final dose of digitalis Laura gave Joanne was much larger than the previous ones, ensuring that Joanne wouldn't survive long enough to voice her suspicions to me or her doctors. Joanne never told me she thought I should marry him, Laura continued, contradicting what she had told me years earlier. That was a lie. Joanne died not knowing that her best friend was her killer. She died trusting me to take care of her family. After Joanne's death, Laura had carefully positioned herself as the grieving friend who couldn't bear to abandon our family. She had manipulated my grief and my daughter's need for a mother figure to work her way into our lives. I was patient, Laura said with disturbing pride. I knew Robert would eventually need someone, and I was determined to be that someone. I had earned it. But Laura's plan had always included eliminating my daughters. She saw them as obstacles to her happiness, and as potential threats who might remember something that could expose her crime. Those girls were never going to accept me as their real mother. They would always love Joanne more, always compare me to her, and children sometimes remember things they shouldn't. It was safer if they weren't around, and since I can't birth a child on my own, I suggested surrogacy to have a child for him and then earn everything. The kidnapping and murder plot was her solution. With the girls gone, Laura would have consoled me through another devastating loss, and we would have had children of our own, children who would never question her place in our family. Laura was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for Joanne's murder, with additional charges for the attempted kidnapping and conspiracy to commit murder of my daughters. The trial was emotionally devastating, but also provided a sense of closure that I hadn't realized I needed. My daughters, who were now 7 years old, attended some of the court proceedings when Dr. James felt it would be helpful for their healing process. They needed to understand that the bad dreams they had been having were actually their minds trying to protect them and our family. Your dreams were like a gift from your mommy in heaven, I explained to them. She was trying to help us figure out the truth so that Laura could never hurt anyone else. The girls took comfort in this explanation. Their nightmares stopped after Laura was sentenced, and they began sleeping peacefully for the first time in years. But the healing process was far from over. We all needed extensive therapy to recover from the trauma of learning that someone we had trusted and loved had been planning to destroy us. Dr. James continued working with the girls, helping them understand that Laura's actions were not their fault, and that they were safe now. I had to rebuild my daughter's trust in me as their protector. They had learned at far too young an age that the adults in their lives couldn't always be trusted to keep them safe. I had to prove to them through my actions and consistency that I would never again fail to notice when they were in danger. I also had to grieve Joanne's death all over again. Learning that she had been murdered rather than dying from natural causes brought back all the pain of losing her, but with the added anguish of knowing that she had suffered at the hands of someone she trusted. I had to work through my guilt about not protecting her, even though logically I knew I couldn't have suspected Laura's true nature. Most importantly, I had to help my daughters process their complex feelings about Laura. They had genuinely loved her at one time, and learning that her affection was false was devastating for them. They struggled with feelings of betrayal, confusion, and guilt over having cared for someone who wanted to hurt them. I made the decision to be completely honest with my daughters about what had happened in age-appropriate ways. I wanted them to understand that sometimes people pretend to be good when they're actually bad, and that it's not their fault when they can't tell the difference. I wanted them to know that their instincts about feeling scared or uncomfortable around Laura had been correct, and that they should always trust those feelings in the future. I explained to them during one of our family talks, Laura made bad choices because she wanted things that didn't belong to her, but that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you for caring about her when you thought she was good. The recovery process took years, but gradually our family found its way back to happiness and security. I never returned to the demanding work schedule that had taken me away from home so much. I restructured my business to allow me to be present for every important moment in my daughters' lives. I kept my promise to Joanne about not blaming myself for her death, though it took a long time to truly forgive myself for missing the signs of Laura's true nature. Through therapy and the love of my daughters, I learned that evil people are often very good at hiding their true selves, and that even the most vigilant parent can be deceived by someone determined to cause harm. My daughters grew up to be strong, resilient, intelligent young women who understood the value of family bonds and genuine love. Jasmine became a pediatric nurse, inspired by her desire to help children who couldn't protect themselves. Jade became a teacher, wanting to create safe spaces for children to learn and grow. Joy became a social worker, dedicating her career to identifying and preventing child abuse. All three of them married good, honest men who understood our family's history and respected the strong bond we had forged through our shared trauma and recovery. They have given me beautiful grandchildren who fill my home with laughter and joy. I never remarried, not because I couldn't love again, but I discovered that my capacity for romantic love had been changed by my experiences with Laura. I found it difficult to trust anyone enough to let them into our tight family unit. But more than that, I realized that my daughters and I had created something complete and beautiful together. We didn't need anyone else to make our family whole. Instead of pursuing romantic relationships, I channeled my nurturing energy into helping other children who needed protection and love. I established an orphanage and children's home, using the financial success of my business to provide safe homes for children who had nowhere else to go. The children at our facility know about our family story, and they find comfort in knowing that people who have survived trauma can create lives filled with love and purpose. My daughters volunteer at the facility regularly, and my grandchildren consider the resident children to be part of their extended family. Working with these vulnerable children has given my life meaning and purpose beyond anything I could have imagined. Every child we help find a loving home, every teenager we support through high school graduation, every young adult who breaks cycles of abuse and neglect, they all represent the victory of love over evil that Laura tried to prevent. As I sit here today with my daughters, their husbands, my grandchildren, and the many children whose lives we've touched through our work, I can honestly say that our family is stronger and more loving than it ever would have been if Laura had never entered our lives. That may seem like a strange thing to say, given everything she put us through, but our experiences taught us to value each other in ways that families who haven't faced such challenges might take for granted. We learned that love requires vigilance, that trust must be earned and maintained, and that protecting the people we care about is the most important responsibility we have. My daughters learned lessons about strength, resilience, and intuition that have served them well in their adult lives. They know how to recognize red flags in relationships, how to trust their instincts when something feels wrong, and how to support each other through difficult times. Joanne would be proud of the women our daughters have become and the family we've built in her memory. I talk to her picture every night, telling her about our days and thanking her for the gift of our children. I believe she knows that her babies are safe, loved, and surrounded by people who would do anything to protect them. The moral of our story isn't that you can't trust anyone or that love is dangerous. The moral is that real love, the kind Joanne and I shared, the kind I have with my daughters, the kind we've built with our extended family of rescued children, is powerful enough to survive even the most evil attempts to destroy it. Evil people like Laura exist in this world, and they're often very good at disguising themselves as the people we need most. But good people exist too, and when good people come together to protect and care for each other, evil cannot win. If you're listening to this story as a parent, I want you to understand that your most important job isn't providing for your children's financial future or making sure they succeed in school or sports. Your most important job is knowing your children so well that you can tell when something is wrong, even when they can't find the words to tell you. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong in your family, investigate it. Don't be afraid to ask difficult questions or have uncomfortable conversations. Don't assume that someone's good reputation or helpful behavior means they can be trusted with your most precious treasures. And if you're listening as someone who has survived trauma or betrayal, I want you to know that healing is possible. The people who try to destroy us don't get to write the ending of our stories. We get to decide how our stories end, and we can choose to end them with love, strength, and purpose. My daughters and I chose to let our pain become our purpose. We chose to transform our trauma into a tool for helping others. We chose to let the love we have for each other be stronger than the evil that tried to tear us apart. Today, our house is still full of children. Not just my grandchildren, but the many kids from our children's home who come for birthday parties, holiday celebrations, and quiet evenings when they just need to be part of a loving family. The laughter that fills our home every day is Joanne's legacy, proof that love really can triumph over evil. Laura is still in prison, where she will remain for the rest of her life. I don't hate her anymore. Hate requires too much energy that I'd rather spend on love. But I will never forget the lessons her evil taught us about the importance of protecting the innocent and cherishing the people who truly love us. If Joanne could see us, now I know she would be amazed by the beautiful, complex, loving family that grew from the seeds she planted. She would be proud of our daughter's strength, delighted by her grandchildren's laughter, and moved by the way we've turned our pain into purpose. And I think she would understand why I never remarried. Not because I was afraid to love again, but because the love she gave me was so complete, so perfect, that it continues to sustain our family even now, years after her death. Some loves are meant to last a lifetime, and ours was one of those. Please let me know in the comments what you would have done if you were in my shoes. Would you have dated your late partner's best friend? Or was I too blind or too weak to easily fall in her trap? And also, have you been betrayed by someone you trusted so much? I'd be in the comments reading your responses. Our story began with tragedy, was marked by betrayal and evil, but it ends with triumph. It ends with a family bound together by love so strong that nothing, not even murder, not even the threat of losing everything we held dear, could break it apart. That's the power of real love. That's the victory of good over evil. And that's the legacy Joanne left for us all. The knowledge that when we choose love over fear, protection over profit, and family over everything else, we create something that can never truly be destroyed. My daughters are living proof that children can survive unthinkable trauma and grow up to be loving, successful, happy adults. The children in our care are living proof that every child deserves love and protection regardless of their circumstances. Our family is living proof that evil doesn't get the last word in any story where good people refuse to give up. So to anyone who's listening and struggling with their own battles against evil, betrayal, or loss, I want you to remember our story. I want you to know that survival is possible, healing is real, and love, real, protective, sacrificial love, is the most powerful force in the universe. That's our story, that's our truth, and that's the legacy we're building. One rescued child, one loving family moment, one act of protection and care at a time. Joanne's love lives on in every life we touch, every child we save, every moment of joy we share. Laura's evil tried to write our ending, but love got the final word instead. And in our family, love always wins. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. Before you go, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel and like this video. We post videos every single day on this channel, so it's a good thing if you check out other videos here too. Don't forget to comment your thoughts and opinions on this story. We'll see you in the next story. Bye.